There's no one more narcissistic than someone who's smart. And if you are smart, that's a real temptation. It can make you bitter as hell. Jordan Peterson. We celebrate intelligence like it's a blessing, as if it guarantees success, recognition, and happiness. But no one talks about the other side, the part where intelligence isolates you, where the world doesn't applaud your insight but ignores it, where being smart doesn't open doors, it just makes the silence louder. Because you see more, understand more, and yet still feel invisible. That's the paradox. The sharpest minds often carry the deepest frustration, not because they failed, but because they expected more. They believed their brilliance would speak for itself, that the world would recognize their light, that clarity and effort and truth would rise to the top. But it didn't. And that's where the bitterness begins. Quiet at first, then louder, until eventually it changes you. Because it's not the lazy or the foolish who grow resentful, it's the brilliant ones who feel unseen, who gave everything. Thought, energy, vision, and got nothing in return. So the mind turns inward, and what once was potential becomes pride. What once was vision becomes contempt. What once was a gift becomes a curse. So ask yourself, what happens when the smartest people become the most bitter? The smarter you are, the more tempting it is to believe you deserve more. More success, more praise, more recognition. It's subtle at first. You work hard, you see things others miss, and deep down, you expect that to be noticed. But when it's not, that quiet expectation hardens into resentment. And now it's not just disappointment, it's entitlement. You start to think the world owes you for being smart, that others should admire your insight, that you shouldn't have to explain yourself, because if they were smart enough, they'd already understand. But they don't, and that disconnect becomes a wound. You begin to feel misunderstood, underappreciated, even insulted by the mediocrity around you. The more intelligent you are, the easier it is to justify this bitterness. You tell yourself it's not ego, it's truth. You're not arrogant, just accurate. You're not bitter, just observant. But all the while, the entitlement grows. And without realizing it, your intelligence starts working against you. Because instead of creating value, it builds walls. Instead of connecting, it divides. And the more it isolates you, the more convinced you become that no one else is worth listening to. That's the trap. Intelligence makes you think you've earned a place above others. But that mindset doesn't elevate you. It locks you in a tower of your own making. High up, yes, but all alone. Highly intelligent people don't always shout their pain. They don't lash out or break down in public. Their bitterness brews in silence. It simmers behind calm expressions, composed tones, and quiet nods. On the surface, everything looks fine, but inside there's a storm, one built from years of being overlooked, dismissed, or misunderstood. Because when you're smart, people expect you to be okay. They assume you'll figure it out. They think your mind is your protection, but intelligence doesn't shield you from disappointment, it sharpens it. You see every flaw in the system. Every moment you were underestimated, every time someone with less depth was praised while you stayed invisible. And eventually that frustration turns inward. You begin to question your worth. Not because you're not capable, but because you wonder if any of it matters. What's the point of insight if no one listens? What's the point of talent if the world prefers comfort over truth? So you stop speaking up. You stop reaching out. And the silence becomes your language. Not because you have nothing to say, but because you're tired of saying it to people who can't hear you. Bitterness doesn't always feel like pain. Sometimes it feels like pride. The intelligent person begins to mistake withdrawal for self-respect, silence for wisdom, distance for strength. They tell themselves they're above it, but they don't need validation, that other people's opinions don't matter. But deep down, they wanted to be seen. They wanted to be understood. And when that didn't happen, pride stepped in to protect them. It became a shield, a way to turn rejection into superiority. You didn't ignore me because I'm unworthy. You ignored me because you're too shallow to understand. It sounds powerful, even noble, but it's not. It's defense masquerading as dignity. And the more it goes unchecked, the more the bitterness feeds off it. You stop giving others the benefit of the doubt. You assume ignorance instead of empathy. You start looking at the world not as a place to contribute to, but as a place that failed to recognize you. And slowly, your pride stops being protection and starts becoming your prison. Because every time you tell yourself you don't care, you lose another chance to connect. Every time you say they're not worth it, you miss the rare few who actually are. And in the mirror of pride, what you see isn't your greatness, it's your armor. Shiny, impressive, but heavy, and deeply, painfully lonely. The line between confidence and narcissism is razor thin, and intelligence makes it even thinner. The smarter you are, the more tempting it is to believe that you see the world more clearly than others. And maybe you do. But over time, that clarity can turn into arrogance. You stop questioning yourself. You stop listening. You assume your insight is always right. And suddenly you're not seeking truth anymore. You're building a case to prove your superiority. Jordan Peterson said it directly. There's no one more narcissistic than someone who's smart, because intelligence gives you tools, language, logic, pattern recognition. And if you're not careful, those tools become weapons. You start using them to defend your ego instead of discovering reality. You justify your resentment with complex reasoning. You mask your insecurity with sarcasm. You turn every conversation into a silent debate where you're always the winner. But the cost is high. You become unreachable, not because others can't relate to you, but because you've already decided they're beneath you. You're not bitter, you say, you're just realistic. But the truth is, bitterness has made you blind. And the smarter you are, the better you are at disguising it, even from yourself. Pride tells you you're better off alone. It whispers that no one else gets it, that no one is worth your time, that connection is just a distraction. And when you're intelligent, that message feels even more convincing. You've seen people misunderstand you, misuse your insight, mock what they don't comprehend. So eventually, you retreat. You become your own island, detached, independent, above it all. But the higher you climb into that tower of solitude, the colder it gets. You start mistaking isolation for self-sufficiency. You think, I don't need anyone, when what you really mean is, no one's ever truly seen me. And instead of reaching out, you double down on your independence. You build walls out of sarcasm, distance, superiority, anything to avoid vulnerability. And the tragedy is, you might even be right. You might genuinely see the world more clearly. You might carry insights that others can't follow. But insight without connection is just noise in an empty room. And the more you isolate, the more that brilliance decays into bitterness. Not because you were wrong to retreat, but because you stayed there too long. When an intelligent person goes off course, they don't just fail, they fail spectacularly. Because the same mind that can build great systems can also self-destruct with precision. That's the danger of intelligence without discipline. It's not a gentle slide into mediocrity, it's a sharp spiral into chaos. The smarter you are, the more elaborate your self-sabotage becomes. You rationalize toxic decisions, you weaponize your insight, you manipulate outcomes not because you're evil, but because you're clever. And instead of facing pain directly, you intellectualize it, explain it away, build a castle of logic around it, until the truth can't reach you at all. And in that isolation, bitterness metastasizes. Pride grows sharper. Resentment becomes a lens you never remove. You look at the world and no longer see opportunity. You see insult. You see proof that you were right to disconnect, right to give up, right to turn cold. And from the outside, people don't see brilliance anymore. They see volatility, arrogance, cynicism. What was once potential becomes a warning sign. What was once admired becomes avoided. And tragically, the intelligent person who could have offered so much becomes trapped in a narrative they built themselves. This is the spectacular fall, not because of failure, but because of wasted greatness. Because intelligence, when poisoned by pride, doesn't just collapse quietly. It crashes with noise, with fire, with impact. And sometimes, by the time the dust settles, the person inside is barely recognizable. There's a reason comic book guy from The Simpsons became so iconic. He's not just a joke, he's a mirror. A perfect caricature of what happens when brilliance curdles into arrogance. He's smart, no doubt, full of references, knowledge, facts, but there's no warmth, no humility, no effort to build or contribute, only criticism from the sidelines. And that's the final evolution of bitter intelligence. When the mind becomes a tool for ridicule instead of revelation. When someone uses their intellect not to connect, but to mock. They know everything, but offer nothing. And worst of all, they don't care. They've stopped trying to be useful, stopped trying to grow. They've replaced meaning with sarcasm, vulnerability with snark, purpose with performance. And it's tragic, because what could have been brilliance turned into bitterness dressed up as superiority. This is what happens when someone convinces themselves that being right is more important than being kind. That cleverness is better than wisdom. That commentary is more powerful than contribution. And over time, that mindset becomes personality. A hard shell of disdain that no longer seeks truth, just validation. Comic book guy isn't funny because he's wrong. He's funny because he's real. Because we all know someone like that. And the scariest part, that someone could be us if we're not careful. So what do you do if you're smart and bitter? If your mind is sharp, but your soul is tired? If the world didn't recognize your brilliance and now all you feel is anger? You start by letting go of the fantasy that intelligence guarantees anything, that being smart means being chosen, that depth will automatically bring reward. It won't. And the moment you accept that, something shifts. Because now, you're free. Free to act without entitlement. Free to learn without ego. Free to connect without superiority. You stop using intelligence as a measuring stick and start using it as a tool. Not to prove something, but to build something. The bitterness fades when the pride breaks. And that doesn't mean you think less of yourself. It means you realize that brilliance means nothing if it's locked away in resentment. That wisdom matters more than cleverness. That humility doesn't make you small. It makes you real. Because here's the truth, the world doesn't owe you recognition, but it's still waiting to be shaped. And if you're willing to drop the armor, to meet life without the shield of superiority, your intelligence can finally serve its real purpose. Not to elevate you above others, but to lift others up beside you. That's not just smart, that's powerful.